All right, let me bring up Kate's slides. She is these ones. And then bam, like that. Okay, Kate, are you ready?
Yep. Hi, everybody.
Fantastic. All right, everybody. Kate Watson from the Centre for Sustainable Energy. Take it away.
Right, I'm going to start by saying if a ginger cat walks in front of the screen, if you can see me, I'm sorry about that. He gets at times. Okay, let's straight into the presentation. You've read the title, so next slide, please. So I quite often feel that energy efficiency is kind of the Cinderella of the energy field. There's a lot of interest in new technologies and how we're decarbonising the grid, and we can do carbon capture and storage, maybe. But, you know, a lot less interest or a lot less excitement around a bit of insulation board and some draft proofing. So hence the comment about it being the Cinderella of the energy industry. Next slide, please. So, and in the next, and the press again, please. So we've got a target for carbon neutrality by 2050. That's a good target. Whether we get there, don't know. But in order to achieve that, we do need to move all our heat demand to be carbon-free or electric. And I think the only way we're going to do that is by moving to renewables. Next slide. So this was taken back in August. It's from a lovely website called GridWatch. If you can't see it, I'm very sorry, but it might be worth having a look on the website afterwards. So it's got, I think it updates itself every 10, 15 minutes. And you can see what percentage of the country's energy is being produced by particular different materials, solar, nuclear, coal, gas, that's the CCGT. So it's a really interesting little website to have a look on. And if you have a look on that day, I think something around 15% was by gas, about 2% biomass, nuclear was 5%. I can't read all of it here, but the demand was about 30 gigatons, I think. I can't read it, so it's very small for me. But I think that's a good place to have a look and see what our demand is. And if you look down the middle row at the beginning, there's wind and solar, and actually they're rather a small amount that was being produced on that day. Next slide. And this is important because nearly 90% of houses in the UK are heated by gas. So if we want to go electric, we've got to get pretty much 90% of people off of gas and heating their homes through electric. And as you can see, probably less than 10% of homes in the UK are heated with electric at the moment. So it's quite a big task. But we did go from pretty much coal to gas during the course of the 50s, 60s, 70s. So it is possible if we want to. Next slide. And within this context, just those two mid-grey boxes, they are the current emissions, greenhouse gas emissions that come from properties in the UK. And as you can see, they're saying 11.2% of all CO2 emissions are coming from residential properties in the UK, which is the highest percentage on that list. So it's actually quite a big amount. Next slide, please. And you know, look, this is a nice little illustration, and it's from Europe, so it's not 100% accurate, but it's not far off. So 64% of energy consumed in a household is for heating. It's slightly more in the UK, but it's around about 65 to 67%. And then they've got 14.8% is water heating, and that's normally on average around 20 to 25% in the UK. And then the rest is cooking, lighting and other appliances. So actually at the moment, because most of us heat our water with gas and we heat our homes with gas, the electrical load is actually very low. So actually if we're going to transfer all of that heat load onto electric, we've got quite a mammoth task. If you look at your individual home and then you look at the number of homes across the UK. Next slide, please. So if we go to retrofit, You know, most people want to reduce their energy bills. We don't like paying through the nose for our energy, anybody. We don't actually like living in cold homes, although I suspect a lot of people have fairly cold homes. I know I do. I wouldn't mind a warmer home. And, you know, 17% of the people asked in this particular survey, I think it was a Bayes survey, ranked it as most important. But that was only after people had redecorated their house, put a new kitchen and bathroom in. So it is something that people want to do, but, you know, we'd like to have a nice home and a nice kitchen and bathroom before we worry about how energy efficient it is. So we kind of do things the wrong way around. Next slide, please. So I was asked about what you can do, and this is literally a slide of different pictures that we can do. So this is draft proofing, simple draft proofing. Things like in between your wooden floorboards. I've done it in my home and it's made a massive difference. Internal wall insulation, external wall insulation, much bigger jobs. Next button, please. Yeah, and again. And that's cavity wall insulation being installed. And again, this is underfloor insulation being put in on a raised timber floor. Loft insulation, double, triple glazing. Next one, this is secondary glazing, composite and very high energy doors. Are there any more? Yes, solar PV, solar thermal, heat pumps. That's MVHR unit, that's in a ventilation unit. Are there any more? Ventilation, yeah. So I think also just not to go back to that slide, but just going through the process, I actually started that slide with looking at the cheapest, easiest measures you can do in your home, building up to some of the more expensive. Now, I wouldn't suggest you put an MVHR unit in last. If you're going to do a retrofit, you probably need to put it in earlier in the process. But, you know, you can start with some really simple things that can be really effective. And then, of course, you can start spending a lot of money. But really, what is the best way to think about how we can transition from a fossil fuel-based heating hot water system to one where we can manage it through fully electric is this slide here, which is to reduce demand first. So that's really looking at how can I change the way I live in my house to reduce my demand on energy. Now, that can be things like, well, it's actually not that cold. I could just put a jumper on and I'll be fine. It can be shutting the curtains in the winter when it gets dark, and that helps keep the cool outside and the heat in, and it helps with convection currents. Nobody really explains the reasons behind that. It just says shut your curtains, but having thick curtains and doing that in the winter can really make a difference. But it's also about shutting doors when you're in the kitchen and you don't want that hot air going around different parts of the house and potentially causing condensation problems. And then what we do after that is we move on to doing insulation. So we're improving the efficiency of the building. And then finally, we look at the services in the building. So that would be improving ventilation. If you needed to improve ventilation, the more airtight you make your home with double glazing, perhaps wall insulation, filling the gaps between your floorboards, putting underfloor insulation in, the more airtight it becomes. And when we make our homes more airtight, it's great because it keeps all the heat in, but also we need to change the air for our homes to be healthy. And particularly we need to get rid of excess moisture that we all produce just by breathing every day, and also cooking and washing and drying clothes. And if you've got pets as well, they'll contribute towards that. So that's the next thing we do. But also if you were going to do energy efficiency works, you know, and you wanted a new heating system, you really want to do the energy efficiency works first, because once you've done those, your heating demand will come down and you can have a smaller sized heating system, which is likely to cost you less money than a larger size heating system in upfront capital costs, and will cost you less money over time because it will be sized appropriately for your house. And certainly, I'm pretty sure it's the same with heat pumps, but Simon will mention this later. You know, if you you want your heating system to work at its optimum capacity, and that's normally running quite high. So if you've oversized it, it's going to keep cutting out because it will reach temperature and then cut out, so it's not going to run at an efficient level. And if it's undersized, it's going to be working hard really all the time, just trying to get your house up to the right temperature. So it's really important. And then finally, we actually just should be looking at renewable energy technologies. Now that's known as the energy demand hierarchy, and it's what we should all be considering. We don't always manage to do it that way round, but if we can think about it that way round, it really helps us understand how we can tackle things in a better order. Next slide, please. So don't get too caught up on this. This is a little bit of modelling that was done for Bristol City Council by some clever people at University College London, and it just has a look at different aspects of buildings, and they came up with 5 typologies. So you've got these are based on Bristol properties, so you've got a flat fronted mid-terrace house, you've got a approximately kind of Victorian mid-terrace house with an annex on the back, you've got an end terrace, you've got a sort of 1930s semi-detached property, roughly speaking, and then you've got a detached property. And the yellow is the heat loss from walls. And you can see really that, you know, the 3 typologies where you get a lot of heat loss through the walls are the 3 larger properties at the end with more wall surface, which obviously makes sense. But if you look at sort of typology 1 and 2, actually, whilst the heat loss through the walls is still really high, the heat loss through, I think it's the windows, which is orange. I'm sorry, I'm struggling to see it because it's so small on my screen and my eyes aren't so good, but it is windows. So the heat loss through the windows can be almost as much as the heat loss through the walls. So that's a fabric intervention if you go from single glazing to double glazing or single to triple, and it can really help you reduce energy loss by doing that fabric intervention as well. Next slide, please. So I was asked to talk a little bit about future-proof. I'm called Future-Proof tonight, so that's the title I've got. It's a project that I've been running for the last 18 months, run by the Centre for Sustainable Energy in conjunction with our partners, the Green Register. It's funded by the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and it's a pilot looking at how we can grow the supply chain. So to you and I, that's builders and people that do work on our homes. So we've got a sort of twin-facing project. So we're running an advice side of projects for people that want to understand how they can make their homes more energy efficient and really get some tailored advice. And we're also working with builders to try and get them to do some more training and really understand the principles of whole house retrofit and some basic building principles so that they can understand better how to do the role that they're doing. Next slide, please. This is just a little slide. I should have updated it with more recent figures, but these are our kind of inquiries. So we're not sort of jam-packed with people phoning all day long every day, but we are having an upward trend of people calling, and for the last few months we've probably had around about 40 people quiet each month. So if you do want to get in touch with us after this, we may not get back to you in 5 days, but we will come back to you. So don't push it, but there is an interest there. So next slide, please. And then, as I said, the other side of the work that we do is working with what Bayes likes to call the RMI sector, which is the refurbishment, maintenance and improvement sector. Again, builders. And we have a bit of an issue with builders in the sector because most of the builders that will work on your home don't realise that they are potentially at the front of the energy retrofit revolution. So the guy that comes around to fit your kitchen, he probably is not going to try and sell you insulation and improvements while he's doing the works for that. Likewise for the person that's going to do your bathroom, maybe the decorator, all of that stuff. So within the industry, we have suppliers of certain products like heat pumps, solar PV, glazing, doors, that sort of thing. And when you want to do that on your own and just do it as an improvement, that can work. But if you've really want to improve your house further and reduce the carbon emissions, you really need to start looking at that kind of whole house approach and how you can really make impact. And actually, when you do want to do that, whether it's an extension as well or a loft extension, what happens is you come across a lot of builders that don't really know how to do that for you. And so there's a very small niche market of builders that operate in this particular arena. And we've been working with them to develop some training, and we're really trying to expand the number of builders that we're working with to get them on board and say, look, come and do this training. You'll get a really good grounding. You've actually got all of the skills because you're a builder and you know what you're doing, but you don't really understand the building physics stuff. And if we can teach you this and the importance attached to making sure you don't get thermal bridges and you've got really good air tightness and you know about ventilation, then you're not going to have any problems on the job that you're doing. Plus, actually, we've sort of created a network between the builders so that they can talk to each other. So if they've got a difficult detail that they're not sure how to do at the customer's house, they can actually get in touch with one of the other builders and say, hey guys, have you done one of these before? I'm not really sure what to do with this. And so they can kind of help each other. So we're growing that network. It's fairly small at the moment. We've had 64 people, individuals, through our training in the last roughly 12 months. So it's not too bad, but we really need to grow that market. And if you've got any great builders that you think would really benefit from this, really encourage them to get in touch and have a look, because we're offering free training at the moment, and we can only offer free training up until the end of March, and then we're probably going to have to charge for it, which makes things much more difficult for everyone. But going back to why it's difficult for them, we fully understand, because a lot of the builders that you'll probably know, they're one-man bands, or they've got there's a couple of people working together, and maybe one of their wives is doing the books and stuff like that. So they don't have a lot of capacity. They work with a lot of subcontractors, and you know, time is money. So why would they take time off to do this stuff? But also, to some extent, we're also kind of part of that, because when we all think about the work that we want to do on our own home, we're always looking for the best price, really, aren't we? You know, we won't always take the lowest one, but we're always looking for the best price. So we're always looking to push down builders on that price so that we can get more out of it from our perspective. But sometimes paying a little bit more for something that somebody knows about more than somebody else might be worth doing. But it's difficult, and there is actually virtually no regulation of builders. So pretty much anybody can set themselves up as a building company, have a white van, and come around and do work on your house, and you hope they're going to do a good job, but who knows. And then, of course, unfortunately, there, you know, lots of, I say unfortunately because I think actually building control worked really well previously, and it's being kind of watered down by competent contractors scheme. And as a householder, you don't necessarily know if the work that your builder's done it is competent unless you know what you're looking for. So you do have to trust people in those situations sometimes. Next slide, please. So what we're trying to teach builders, as I've said, is a sort of whole house approach and a fabric first approach. Why would we do that? And the key issues here are, as I've mentioned before, thermal bridging. We don't want any gaps in our thermal envelope because it encourages condensation and mold growth. We want really good ventilation so that our houses are healthy. We don't want to build up of carbon monoxide in them. We don't want any of the kind of inert gases. You know, people have dust mites. There's all those sorts of things that fresh air will help with. We need air tightness. And maybe we need appropriate materials for the building that we're working with, or perhaps, you know, people may have allergies in their own and want to minimize types of glues and different products that come into their home. And in the past, there's been some energy efficiency schemes that have run by the government. You'd have probably all heard of the Green Deal. It wasn't a fantastic piece of legislation from the government. I won't go into the details of that, but as a result of some of the feedback from the Green Deal, they have tried to improve the process and quality assurance. So in the future, you may hear the PAS 2035 chucked out somewhere else, and this is a quality assurance process So if you are thinking of potentially not in the next 6 months, the Green Homes grants, but past March next year, if they run any more, you may need builders that have got PAS 2035 certification, or you may need to get someone called a retrofit coordinator to come and help you sign off works on your home in order to get that money. We'll see how that goes, but it's there as a process to try and help improve the quality of the work in the arena. And as I said, we're also trying to get people to just understand the fundamentals of building physics. Next slide. So I'm not sure if you're going to share these slides. The Green Homes grants are, you should be able to sign up from the end of this month. The simple energy advice website. You put in some simple details, your postcode, and it will come up with some suggestions of what you can have under, to improve your home. It'll give you a little bit of information about what to look for, and you can then link through to the Trustmark website, where you can find a builder that may be able to do an installation in your area. To be fair, there aren't that many builders across the country at the moment that are on that Trustmark scheme. They will be increasing, but at the moment it's minimal. And actually, if anybody's interested, if you sign up through Futureproof to get some support, we can give you some really specialised advice about what you might be interested in, give you a bit of extra information about that than you might get on the other website. And if we have a referral partner that is signed up to do the Green Homes grants, we can certainly put you in touch with them. Not everybody on our referral partners is going to be a Green Homes grant voucher scheme, and we can't necessarily refer you to everyone. So we would potentially, if we can't refer you to one of our known trusted contractors, we would definitely send you in the direction of the Trustmark website, where you can look for them for yourself. Fundamentally, there's a primary measure, which would include pretty much any insulation or low carbon heat, which also includes solar thermal. And then there's secondary measures. You can only have a secondary measure if you've got a primary measure. And then whilst you can have up to 2/3 of the cost, maximum of £5,000, if you get £1,000 for your primary measure and you want some secondary measures, you won't get more than £1,000 for your secondary measure, even if your secondary measure is more expensive. So just be aware of that if it's something you're interested in. I have also just found out today, after I sent this slide deck across, that you can actually use the grant voucher to help with planning applications, building control, advice line support, a retrofit coordinator. There's a whole heap of ancillary kind of works that you can use your voucher to get support on. So if you was thinking about something that did need planning approval, then there is, there is money there to help with an upfront cost of a planning application. So that's actually quite good, because in any other government sort of schemes, there's absolutely no help for any of that stuff at all. So that can be prohibitive for some people. There will be a local authorities scheme that comes out probably from March. I don't think Bristol has applied for it in the first tranche, which is kind of now, but they may do going forward. I don't know at the moment. And a lot of that's based on either the state of your house, whether you're in full poverty, and your income. But you do get more money if you fall into those categories. But everything needs to be fully funded for the £10,000. You can't give money towards that. So if you did know somebody you thought might qualify for it, if they wanted a heat pump, that £10,000 would need to pay for the whole of the heat pump. They can't invest any of their own money in it. And also, private landlords can apply for up to £5,000 to help them through the process. I think it may only be available on 1 or 2 properties. So if you're a private landlord and you've got multiple properties, you can't use it on, you can't just kind of keep going through and getting those grants, I'm afraid. So next slide, please. And then alongside that, there's the renewable heat incentive. And I may be stealing something Simon was going to say, but you can actually use the Green Homes grants alongside the renewable heat incentive. So if you wanted a heat pump or a solar thermal unit put in, you could use up to that £5,000 for your upfront capital cost to purchase the equipment you wanted. And then that money would be taken off the renewable heat payments that you would normally get over the next 7 years. So I don't know if they spread that over the 7 years, or you get sort of 2.5 years of renewable heating payments because you've had £5,000 up front. But it can be a really good way to get that heat pump, particularly if you haven't got sort of £5,000 to £10,000 sitting around ready to invest in a heat pump. But if you can get £5,000 from the government, then maybe that can help. And next slide, please. I think that might be it. That's pretty much it. As a bit of a whirlwind through what we offer here. If you do have any questions, pop them in the chat box, and hopefully we can answer them in the Q&A session later.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Kate. Some people have put some really good questions in there already, but we will save them until after Simon's spoken in case he covers any of that. I know Simon saw Kate's slides earlier, so he has slightly amended his. So maybe he will answer some of the questions. That would be good. Simon, are you ready? Are you muted? Yes, you are. Ask to unmute. Fingers crossed. Let me get your slides up while we're doing that. So those are yours. And do it like that. Okay. Oh, is that the wrong person? Oh, have we lost Simon?
No, I'm still here.
There he goes. Ooh, he scared me there. Okay, this is Simon Duffen. He is, what did we say? You're an energy consultant at Solarense.
That's correct, yeah. A renewable energy consultant, I want to point out.
Oh yes, important.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, next, as you've introduced me already, Dorian, can we move on to the next slide then? Okay, so as Kate has already pointed out in her presentation, that the steps to energy efficiency are threefold. First of all, you need to reduce demand, then you need to increase efficiency, and then finally, you need to green your supply, move to a green supply of energy. So what I'm looking to do here is take you through some of those green supply options. But first, I just want to reiterate one theme, Dorian, if we may move to the next slide, please. And that is about insulation. Now, if you look at this graph here, which is really showing you the difference in energy use between typical homes, so those are homes from the 50s, and a future home, a passive home. And as you can see there, the main difference in energy usage is space heating. And that difference is brought about by insulation, increased levels of insulation in modern homes compared with what we might call traditional homes. So it is really important, once again, like I say, to reiterate what Kate said, is that you do increase the insulation in your home first off, because it doesn't matter what you use to heat your home. If the heat is just going out through the walls and the roof, it's doing you no good at all. Yeah, it does increase your EPC rating as well. It fundamentally modernizes your home, and also it should improve the value of your home as well. Okay, there is another, oh, you're a bit quick there, Dorian, but it doesn't matter. There is another conundrum, a slight conundrum here. You'll notice that on the right-hand side of that slide, it highlights where heating, hot water and cooking is traditionally from dirty carbon fuels, which obviously we need to eradicate. And a lot of the alternative ways of heating and cooking will be using electricity. So we ought to be aware that, you know, to some degree, we're moving away from some, you know, we're replacing a certain amount of energy which we're saving from oil and gas with electric energy. Okay, thanks, Dorian. Okay, so let's move straight on to looking at the various different green supplies. So first of all, there's air source heat pumps. Now, this is likely to be the most common alternative to gas and oil boilers. Currently, they do attract a Green Homes grant and a renewable heat incentive. And as I'm sure you're aware that from 2025, oil and gas boilers will no longer be allowed to be installed, or you won't be able to replace your boiler with an oil and gas boiler. So fairly shortly, oil and gas boilers will in fact be redundant technology. So this is the future we're looking at here, air source heat pumps. And so how do they work? An air source heat pump can supply heating and domestic hot water from a renewable source. So you both reduce bills and reduce CO2 output. Next one, please, Dorian. They consist of a heat pump, which sits outside your house, and a hot water cylinder that helps to store the energy created, which sits inside your house. Okay, so what the air source heat pump does, which is sitting outside, it harvests heat energy from the air and converts it to a higher temperature using the same technology that you have in an air conditioning unit or a fridge, but in reverse. So it's connected to electricity and water, and that's all. It's clean, quiet, and really efficient. And that's one of the keys to renewable energy. It's much more efficient. For every kilowatt of energy it uses to create energy, it creates 3 kilowatts of heat. So it's actually 300 times efficient. Oil and gas, by comparison, are at best sort of 85 to 90% efficient. So, you know, for every kilowatt of heat energy, sorry, every kilowatt of oil or gas energy you use, you get less than 1 kilowatt of heat energy produced. Okay, so this is a typical layout in a home. So you have the air source heat pump on the outside of the house, feeding radiators and the water cylinder, which is sitting inside the house. So on the next slide here, which shows how the water circulates around your room. So you can see the air source heat pump sitting outside your house on the left there. And the red line is the hot water coming out of the air source heat pump. Some of it goes up into the thermal store, the water tank, and some of it goes down into your radiators. Obviously that is in your water tank passes through a heat exchanger and then heats your hot water as required, domestic hot water, and then it returns back through the loop back to the air source heat pump and gets reheated again. Okay, so that was air source heat pumps. So air source heat pumps, just to recap, can do domestic hot water, can do your heating all year round without any problem. So they basically just replace your boiler and take on all the duties that your existing boiler take on. Okay, so we're now going to look at solar thermal. This is also currently attracts a Green Home grant and the Renewable Heat Incentive, the RHI, as well. So Solar thermal has been around for about 25 years, and it uses the sun to produce heat for hot water only. So it doesn't heat your home. All it will do is produce hot water for you. Now, there are two different sorts of air source heat pump. There is, sorry, not an air source heat pump, a solar thermal panel. One is a flat plate collector and one is evacuated tubes. Evacuated tubes are the most efficient, and again, they are, 300% efficient. They produce 3 times as much heat as the energy they absorb. On the next slide, it'll show you, there you go, how it works here. So you have the solar collectors on the top left. They go into the heat that they collect is used to heat a cylinder, again coils in a cylinder, and that will use and that will be used to heat your hot water. But as you'll also see here, you still need a boiler for your central heating, and also potentially to give you some hot water in winter as well. Okay. So as I was saying before, that a lot of what we're going to get from a modern house, or a renewable energy powered house, will be driven by electricity. Okay, you'll be using a lot less electricity, and it will be a lot less expensive than if you had been using oil and gas. But even so, it will increase your electricity demand. So really, as part of the whole renewable energy piece, although this isn't necessarily about heating, we also want to think about solar panels. Solar panels have been around for 20 years, so the technology is fairly well optimized now. And what solar panels does is produce electricity from the sun to power your home and your renewable heating. This house here is, oh no, back again, there we go. This house here, as you see, is just a fairly standard surface mounted retrograde panels. And then moving on, we can see these panels now, which can be integrated into the roof, which a lot of people think are much more aesthetically pleasing. So these are the panels being put into trays in the roof. And on the next slide, you will see a roof there. And as you can see, it's a slate roof, and towards the end of the roof there, you can see there are integrated solar panels. But also, solar is getting quite clever now, and you can, in fact, integrate solar cells into roof tiles. This is a slate roof which has got solar capabilities, because there are solar cells in the tiles. Okay, so just quickly to explain how solar panels work. You have solar cells in your solar panels on your roof. They convert light into electricity. That's a direct current, so that comes down from the solar panels and is converted in the inverter to alternating current. Alternating current is what we use in our homes. So that will go from the inverter down through a generation meter, so you know how much your panels are generating, and then into the consumer unit. Now, from the consumer unit, either it will move into your house if you have demand in your house. Alternatively, it might be stored in a battery. If you are producing more than you can use, then it will get exported back to the national grid. Okay, so now, like I said, solar panels are quite mature technology now, and it has been optimized. And as you can see here, over the last 20 years, the power panels is more than doubled. In 2002, a panel was about 150 watts. Now 370 watt panels are pretty much standard. There are more powerful panels also available, 400 watt panels. And in fact, they just produced the first 500 watt panel, although I don't think it's on really commercially available. Also, if you can click the button again, there we go. Thanks, Dorian. Also, you'll see over the last 20 years, not only has the power of panels gone up, but they've dropped in price by about four-fifths. So, like I say, solar panels now, even though they don't have renewable incentive or any other incentives, they are very cost effective. Okay, so just a quick few words on batteries. Battery storage, this is a real game changer for solar and all renewables, really. Renewables powered by electricity as well, because it allows you to optimize the use of your solar generated electricity and balance the generation with your usage. This diagram here shows in the yellow hill in the middle is really when your solar panels are generating, and the blue and the green hills either side of the day are typically when people use more electricity. So as you can see on that particular example, a lot of the electricity generated by the panels would just have to be exported back to the grid, which is pretty pointless. With a battery, you can store the generation you make during the day. Can you go on to the next? Thank you. So your panels will be generating electricity during the day whilst the sun is out, and that electricity can be stored in a battery and used when you need it. So if you go on to the next slide, please, Dorian. So that's a typical installation of a Tesla Powerwall battery indoors, but also, as you can see on the next slide, if you're tight for space, you can also store them outdoors as well. Okay, so that is a quick run through on how we can green our energy supply. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Simon. So, Kate, if you want to unmute yourself as well, let's have a few questions. Before we move on to the questions, though, I know that this is the part of the evening when some people think that they've heard everything that they want to hear and they start to leave. So I'll just remind you to please go to cliftonclimateaction.org or bcrenergygroup.org, whichever one appeals to you more. Please check out our local and green resources, particularly the home energy efficiency page. There's loads more information about all the sorts of things you've heard tonight. But there's loads more information about all sorts of topics to do with climate change, sustainability, and all of that important stuff. And do please, if you've enjoyed tonight's talk or found it helpful, please consider going to paypal.me/Clifton Climate Action. Even if you can just give £2 or £3, if everyone did that, we'd be set fantastically well. So yeah, that's the only plug I wanted to give. In fact, I will stick this back up here. There we go, it's on the screen if you want it. Okay, so let me get to some questions, because we had some good questions come in that I think both of Kate and Simon will have something to say about. So the first one that we got was a really interesting one. So given the increasing call being made on electricity for electric cars, etc., when do you think is the optimum time for individuals to move from gas to electric boilers? Or should we not be going to electric boilers? I don't know who wants to talk about this first.
Well, I'll chip in straight away. If your gas boiler is about to break down, you've got an opportunity to decide whether you change from gas to another form of energy. If you have a very uninsulated and leaky home, you might be struggling to make it as energy efficient as you can to appropriately size whatever heating system you need to be future-proofed. So by that I mean, if you can't do the insulation works before you change your boiler, you're going to have a boiler that's sized for an uninsulated home. If you then try to improve your home, your boiler, whatever its mechanism, is going to be overheating or oversized for the heat demand you have on your home. So it makes it a bit tricky. Hopefully, what would be better is not having to do it as a kind of like, oh my God, my boiler's coming to the end of the life, or it's just stopped, is to think about a process where you can get to the point where when you're ready to upgrade your boiler, i.e. it's coming to the end of its useful life, but it's still functioning, you have improved the energy efficiency of your home to a reasonable amount, or to the amount that you are likely to be able to do without any major obstacles, whether they're financial or planning or whatever. And then you can choose how to upgrade your boiler for the most appropriate source at that time, whenever that time comes around. That's a long answer, and it's not a straightforward one. Sorry.
Simon, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think
Kate's covered it.
Full answer.
Good stuff.
Can I expand on that question a bit and explain what I meant?
Oh, yes. Go on then, Sian.
I was looking at it in a wider context. I wouldn't want to draw on electricity resources when it will mean using coal-fired power stations even more, because other people are wanting electricity for electric cars, etc., etc. We don't have infinite electricity at the moment. So when in the wider context would it be worth us considering making this move?
Well, if I might...
no, go for it, Simon.
That one. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, I think that you make a very good point there, Sian. But actually, we are now, even within the national grid, we are using increasingly more and more renewable energy. And in fact, for 3 months of this year so far, up to the end of May, there was no coal-fired generation at all, which you might be aware of. The other thing is, a lot of people who have electric cars also, because they could be considered early adopters, and they are concerned about the environment. They also have car chargers at home, so they tend to charge their cars themselves. They quite often have solar panels as well that helps to mitigate the charging of their cars. But also they quite often use renewable sources to charge their cars as well. So I mean, we have got enough electricity and enough generation in this country. The challenge we have is we tend to want to use it all at the same time. But with electric cars, the ideal time to charge your electric car is at night, when there's loads of energy available. So it's not, at the moment we're not under such a pressure. So really the time to reduce your carbon emissions is straight away.
Yeah, what's that phrase that gets overused constantly? The best time to do it was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Yeah, that applies to so many things we're talking about, I think. But yeah, it's another point worth making is that if you switch everything over to electric, but continue getting your electricity from one of these bad, evil, dirty electricity companies, then you're only just moving around the problems, basically. So as we electrify more and more of our homes, I hope everyone is considering the companies and things that they get their energy from. There's information about good suppliers and things on both websites if you want to check that out. So, okay, this is an interesting one. Does triple glazing provide a significant energy saving over double glazing? And this person says, I've heard varying answers in the past. Do either of you want to talk about that?
Well, I haven't got the U values. The answer is not a significant saving. And if you're going from single glazing to triple, then you're going to really notice it. Double glazing, I wouldn't, unless your double glazed windows need replacing, it's probably not worth spending the money on triple glazing because they are quite expensive, although they're coming down as well. I think also to consider is, how airtight is your home? So if you want to move to triple glazed windows, yes, you'll get the extra fill from the extra layer of glass and argon gas. But if you haven't got a very airtight home, i.e. you've got lots of gaps that haven't been filled elsewhere, is it worth spending that extra money to get the slightly better sort of fabric finish there whilst you're losing warm air elsewhere? So it really depends on the circumstances. It's very, generically, the answer is not really. It's in answer to that question, but it really depends on circumstances. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. If I may be a little bit cheeky, I'd like to give a plug to the Cheese Project. I'm sure many people in Bristol have heard of them by now. And full disclosure, I work for the Cheese Project as an energy tracer. So please book lots of surveys and give me jobs. But yeah, it's a really, really useful thing, because what we do is we go around your house with a thermal imaging camera and a big fan which creates drafts, and then we identify where the strongest drafts are in your home. And from my one season of doing surveys, I can tell you, I have seen plenty of homes where people have told me, oh yes, we're really worried about the windows. The windows let out so much heat, and actually it's not the windows. They need to replace the door or something like that. So, you know, either get yourself a cheese survey or find another way to identify where the big problems are in your home and address those first, or address all of the cheapest problems and save your money for something like triple glazing. I think that makes sense to me. Okay, so the next question is a good one, particularly for the areas that our two groups cover. Advice for listed buildings, or where to go to get advice for listed buildings?
Well, you can phone Future-Proof, so we can give you some advice. It is slightly dependent on what planning officer you might get. So let's see. But Bristol can be challenging to get consistent advice from, depending on who your conservation officer is. You know, Bristol are not completely difficult to work with from a planning perspective, but they are at times challenging. We've been through a difficult experience with a client on Future-Proof to get solar panels, and they have challenged that in order to enable her to, I believe, put solar panels on the front elevation in a conservation area. There are other examples of conservation areas where people have them on the roof, and I don't know why it was so difficult for her, but she has spent a lot of money trying to get that through. So if somebody did want solar panels and they think that the conservation area issue will stop them, you can always get in touch with me, and I'll see if I can give you some detail about what came up there. It's a bit of a long-winded story. Listed building, you have to speak to a conservation officer before you can do anything, and it really depends on the state of your listing, what's actually listed and under the listing. You know, some places it's a facade, some places it includes absolutely everything kind of that was fitted in the building when it was put together, and actually, you know, stuff that was added at a later date that doesn't necessarily go with the building, but you know, it was there when it was listed, so it was put in the listing. It can be a challenge. I'm not going to lie. You know, there are precedents of people putting double glazing into listed buildings, but most listed buildings officers will probably tell you need to keep your original windows. That's particularly true if you have the original glass in the windows as well. You know, you could smash all the glazing panels anyway, and then you'd have to get new glass, and they can't make you sit there with like holes in your windows. But I didn't say that. But you know, there are things you can do. You can do secondary glazing. There are ways of improving the energy efficiency through things like thermal renders. You can definitely use them internally. I've been speaking to an architect friend that's thinking of specifying a thermal render on the rear of her listed building in Montpellier. It's a Georgian building. So there are things you can do. It's a lot of money, you know, and you don't get quite the same thermal improvement that you would get if you were doing solid wall insulation, but it will increase that. And if you needed to re-render your house, and you could re-render it with a render that had a thermal capacity to it rather than a cementitious render that would destroy the building fabric, you know, I know what I'd go for. So there are options, but you know, realistically, it is a conversation with a conservation officer, and it can quite often be a very slow and painful conversation with the conservation officer. Having an architect on board that you can work with, that knows the planning officers, can actually be an advantage. Sometimes it can be worth the money to speak to an architect and get their support, because if they're a local architect and they do a lot of work in the area, they will have relationships with the planning officer, and that can help. Not always, but it can. And yeah, I mean, personally, I would, you know, at some level, you have a choice about what councillors you elect and what you think is important. And if you think Bristol City Council's interpretation of the planning regulations doesn't really address these issues, then I would say you've got two routes. One is through local elections, and then the other one is through local planning groups. So you can get involved with that and draw up local plans for how development in your area goes. And if you have pressure in that area, you can really start to change the way that Bristol City Council does things. It's not always helpful on retrospectively in terms of listed conservation areas, but certainly it would mean that, you know, pushing towards new buildings having more and more renewables included.
Okay, great. So this question's about the Green Homes Grant. Can you use the Green Homes Grant for zero carbon self-build, including planning permission? I've got a feel, no, you can't, can you?
No new builds, I'm afraid.
No new builds, I'm afraid. Okay, this is an interesting one. So obviously during the era of COVID, a lot more people are working from home. What effect is that having on electricity use? I guess it's going up domestically, but it's going down overall. Is that correct?
Well,
and I was going to say, and heating.
Oh, and heating, yes, of course.
And that's coming to, you know, obviously not so much in the past few months, but coming up, there's going to be more people working at home in colder homes or heating their homes more. Okay,
yeah. Who wants to talk
yeah,
about?
I mean, I think there's, you know, this isn't an area of any great expertise, is it? It's just common sense. You're right. And if you're going to spend more time in your home, you're going to be using more energy in your home. Whereas if there was 10 people using, you know, in an office, they're going to be sharing that energy between 10 of them, whilst their homes would probably not be using any energy during the day. So yeah, common sense would suggest that we might be using more energy if we're working from home, but then we won't be using so much energy traveling to work and back.
Yeah, it's a difficult bit of maths to do that, I suppose. I suppose our offices aren't exactly designed to be cozy, and maybe homes are, and at homes you've got a better supply of jumpers near to hand. So if everyone can just start stocking up on jumpers and good socks, then maybe we can avoid a spike in energy consumption.
I think there are a couple of other things on this. Where if you've got TRVs, thermostatic radiator valves, you have a workspace that is sort of dedicated to working rather than not my space, which is my kitchen living room. You could, you know, turn kind of the rest of your heating system off pretty much for the day and just heat that one room, or potentially use an electric heater to add heat into the room if you're working from home. I'm lucky that my business that I work for is giving us a little bit of money towards our electricity and energy costs. It certainly isn't going to pay my heating bill if I've got to have my heating on for 8 hours a day, normally be at work over the winter. But, you know, in terms of, there are sort of, I think, possibilities for that. But I think, again, this comes back to the reality of the situation, which is, are you likely, if you are working from home, to move back to an office at some stage and significantly, or have you significantly changed the way you work? And are you likely to spend a lot more time working at home? And if you think that's the case, then I would say, what are the opportunities for you to make a dedicated kind of workspace and improve that space for you so that it is a warmer environment for you to work in the winter, without suffering from overheating issues in the summer? So yeah, so it's a really good question, and I think it is something that I would be interested to see if it impacts how people come to future-proof in the next 6 months as more people are working at home through the colder months. We've been remarkably lucky with the summer that we've had. It's not been that cold. So, yeah.
Great. I've just lost my place. I have noticed it has gone 8:30, but if everyone's okay, I'd like to go for another few minutes at least, just to get some of these really interesting questions answered. Okay, we talked about that a bit. What is the lifeline of the RHI incentive? I've forgotten what the acronym stands for now.
Renewable heat incentive.
That's the one. Renewable heating incentive. Yes. How do we expect that to be around for a while?
Simon.
Go on, Simon.
Well, okay. It runs basically. It runs till the end of the financial year after next.
Okay. A while, but yeah.
Well, yeah. So you've got what, 15 months or so? No, more than that. Where are we? No, you got 18 months or so to go for it.
Okay.
Thereafter, they are saying that there will be something else, but they said that. Yeah, they always say that. Who knows? But yeah. So at the moment, there's about 18 months to go now.
Okay. A question, I guess this one's probably best for Kate. Somebody here is saying that they were wondering were many heating engineers getting trained to fit heat pumps? They recently raised it with one who didn't feel it was worth his while at the moment to take time out to do training. I'm sure you've
Well, I mean, to be fair, I think Simon would probably have a better idea about that. Most of the people I'm sort of trying to work with are general builders. I would quite like a few more plumbers and electricians to come on board as well. Actually, the majority of them are carpenters. That says something. Simon, maybe you have a better understanding of gas heating engineers and heat pump engineers.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a heat pump is slightly easier to install, because you don't need to have, you're not dealing with gas, so you don't need to be corgi trained. You just need to have an electrician and a plumber for an air source heat pump. So you're right, there will be, I'm sure, a lot of people who are dealing with boilers at the moment who are, corgi qualified engineers, who will, as demand changes, will pivot towards air source heat pumps. Just like there are, Worcester, Bosch, for instance, and a lot of boiler manufacturers are also looking for renewable alternatives as well. Because as I mentioned earlier, that by 2025 you won't be able to put you won't be able to install an oil or gas boiler. So all those people who are currently involved in that work, I'm sure will be installing air source heat pumps or equivalent.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, this might be a question more for Future Proof itself, but can you recommend something efficient to replace an archaic electric hot water storage tank in a 70s council flat? We have to heat a certain amount overnight with no idea if we'll need it all or need more, and the pressure vanishes after you fill 4 inches in the bath. So,
is that a hot water tank in the loft, or is that an immersion heater?
They didn't say in the question, but Alistair, if you want to put anything in the comments. Immersion heater.
Yeah, you could probably just change it for a new thermal store and you'd probably get a much better outcome from it. I'm not a hot water engineer. I'm just going to chuck that one out there. It's not my area of expertise. But old-fashioned immersion heaters are not particularly efficient, especially if you don't have a thermostat on them, because they'll just carry on while they're on, or you've got to switch them on or switch them off again. If it's not particularly well lagged, it's going to lose heat throughout the day. Modern immersion heaters are much better. Or a thermal store, which you might be able to connect in the future to something else. Simon, have you got something to say?
Yeah. I think we need to. I think we may be mixing our descriptions up a bit here. What I think the question is referring to is a water cylinder. which is used to store hot water. How that hot water is heated depends on what the energy is. One of the options to store to heat hot water, typically if a water tank is heated generally by oil and gas or a boiler, and people want to turn the boiler off during the summer, or if they have if they've used all their hot water, they might use an immersion heater within that cylinder to heat it up, to heat the hot water up. I just noticed the answer came up that it's in fact an electric system. So it's an all-electric system. Certainly if you get a modern water tank, sorry, a water cylinder, it will be very well insulated, and you'll be using a lot less electricity to heat it up, and the hot water should stay hot for pretty much 24 hours. So yeah, that would certainly help. But if you are in an all-electric home for heating hot and hot water, yeah, that typically will be quite expensive. So I can imagine why getting the best use out of your hot water is important for you.
Yes, I will just, to answer somebody's private question, yes, it is called the CHEESE project. It's Cold Home Energy Efficiency Survey Experts, because everything in Bristol has to have an acronym, except CSE. You guys bucked the trend. And us, to be fair. BCR Energy Group, it's not our fault, we inherited the name. Right, okay, yes, this is one. I inquired about solid wall insulation and was quoted £15,000 for my 1926 end of terrace. Has the cost come down yet?
No, probably not.
Probably not.
If anything, it may have gone up slightly.
Really?
Sorry, that's not the answer you want to hear. It's an interesting one, because I think we've all got very used to the graph that Simon put up about seeing the efficiency of solar panels go up and the cost come down. When you look at what you're paying for with insulation, it's very different. The cost of the insulation is relatively insignificant. What the cost is that you're paying for is somebody to put it on the wall, and it's generally plasterers that do it. And if any of you have ever had your house replastered, you'll know that they're generally not that cheap. So you're paying for a day rate for a plasterer, and you're paying for scaffold costs. So the most of the money goes into that rather than the equipment or the materials to do the job. So unless you want people to be working for fairly little, unfortunately, the cost is probably not going to come down very much. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is our last question, unless anyone else has got anything they want to sneak in under the, whatever the expression is. And it's Alistair again. What would you recommend for thin ceiling insulation to replace big polystyrene blocks, like a suspended office ceiling? Something like Sempertap, insulating paint, or maybe even cork tiles? And any other thoughts on cork in general as an insulator? Again, mate,
yeah, cork is great insulator, actually. And when I was talking about the insulating renders or plasters, there's a fantastic product called diathanite. Apparently it's a little bit of a pain to put on, but once you get used to it, it's a very good product. I'm not quite sure why you've got a sort of office suspended ceiling in your house. Maybe it isn't, maybe it's in the office. Difficult to say, because it really depends how it's fixed and what it's fixed to, because anything that you add on weight wise needs to be considered into the structural elements of the house and the overall weighting. So I would find that very difficult to give you an off the top of my head idea without seeing it, and you may need a structural engineer if there's any real weight in the cost, in the weight of the insulation.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry. Take it down, yeah, and see what's originally there.
No, yeah, I'm joking, of course, but yeah, I hope you get that fixed, mate, because it sounds like you've got a very inefficient house there. Barry's got the right attitude. Barry wants to know, this is the man who asked about solid wall insulation. Can he do it himself? What skills does he need?
External wall insulation. The tricky bit, as Kate says, is the plastering skills, because obviously you have to attach the insulant back to the wall, obviously, which is just done with plugs. That's not too tricky. The detailing around windows and apertures obviously is difficult, but the biggest thing, which is difficult, which is a skill, which takes a while, is, as Kate says, applying the render. And render is a lot more difficult than normal plaster as well. And so it's not easy, but anything can be learned. But it would be a project.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, I'd say if you've got a kind of single-story outhouse by any chance, that might be the best to start rather than up the top of a scaffold. I would recommend you also surface fix it rather than just plug fix it, because you're trying to eliminate any cold spots behind by air movement going through. And the detailing around any weird things like soil pipes, corners where you've got a door or a window that's right on the corner, and being able to open your window and door around any reveals, and underneath the nominal DPC damp-proof course. And I say nominal because if anybody tells you you need to put a damp-proof course in an old house, guess what? They didn't build them with damp-proof courses. If anything, you've got a bit of slate in between some bricks somewhere, and that's your damp-proof course. So the detailing is incredibly important to minimize thermal bridging, because if you get thermal bridging, you're likely to get condensation forming on cold spots on the inside of your house. And if you get condensation for long enough, you'll get black mold growth, and you don't really want black mold growth in your house. It's not really good for your health. I lived in a flat with really bad black mold, and I got problems with my sinuses for the last 10 years. So I don't recommend it. So it's really not good for respiratory illnesses either in the time of COVID. So you don't want one of those. But yeah, I mean, fundamentally, if you're very good at what you're doing, you could do it. But whether you'd get a guarantee off of anybody for installing it yourself, I think that's highly unlikely. So if anything went wrong, you wouldn't get the insurance to cover it. I'm not sure your house, I don't know whether you'd have to check whether your house insurance would cover it as well.
Okay, well, Barry, if you do try it, let us know how it goes. Take before and after pictures and we'll feature you on the website. But I love your attitude. And if you want any of those instructions repeated back to you, the recording of this talk will probably be on the BCR Energy Group's YouTube channel on Monday, most likely. And I will try and share it far and wide. But I think that's all the questions we've got. So huge thanks to Kate and Simon for coming to talk to us. Thanks to everybody else who has come to listen. Please do check out the links that are still on your screen. We will be back in 2 weeks' time with Dr. Steve Mellier from the University of the West of England, talking about the West of England Combined Authorities Joint Local Transport Plan, which we plugged heavily at the last talk because the guys from Friends of Suburban Bristol Railway couldn't keep bringing it up. So that one should be great. And then October is Biodiversity Month. We've got those 2 talks that you can see on the screen in front of you. And yeah, have a good rest of your evening, everybody. And we hope to see you at another talk very soon.